Om Shanti, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to another Yoga Small Talk, and we continue with 7 minutes Bhagavad Gita a day. So we have concluded the part in chapter 2 where Lord Krishna describes the immortal nature of the self, and the summary is in verse 25. This self is said to be unmanifested, unthinkable, and unchangeable. Therefore, knowing this to be such, thou should not grieve. So, we are closing here the circle. Remember, in verse 11, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, thou is grieved for those that should not be grieved for. And one might ask, well, why say such a thing? I mean, Arjuna is going to lose people that he's very close with, so why this statement is coming? How should we understand it? And here this little circle is closed. Lord Krishna says that when you understand the true nature of the self, you do not grieve, because the self is absolute bliss. There is no grief in the self. The self cannot be changed. The self is immortal. So whatever is going to happen here in the battlefield, the weapons, the fire, the wind, the water, the elements, basically, will not affect the self. It will not really make a difference in the absolute reality. So once you understand this, there is no more grief. But this is, of course, very, very, very difficult. And Swami Shivananda helps us a little bit here with the commentary, saying, the self is not an object of perception. It can hardly be seen by the physical eyes. Therefore, the self is unmanifested. And meaning that for us, when we talk about the self, it's a concept. Before we reach this very, very, very elevated state of samadhi, Swami Shivananda says, as the self cannot be perceived by the eyes, it is unthinkable. So our mind cannot perceive it. Why is Lord Krishna giving this information to Arjuna anyway? Meaning he's giving it to us, the common person who is in the constant struggle of the world, of the day-to-day life. We are constantly in this struggle. Why start with this information of something that for us is unthinkable? And this is for two reasons. The first is to give us perspective, to start with the highest knowledge, to take us out of our state of delusion. So we see the fuller picture. Arjuna needs to see here that which is beyond what his eyes are seeing, what his senses are perceiving, and this feeling of pleasure and pain, attraction and repulsion. So first, the highest knowledge to take us out of the state of shock. But then there is another thing. Basically, Arjuna comes to Lord Krishna and he tells him, I cannot even hold my bow. It slips from my hand. And Lord Krishna tells him the message here. You are not this weak body. You are not those emotions that throw you from side to side. You are not as helpless as you think. You are a very, very, very mighty expression of the self. You are in your nature the self, which is immortal, which is changeless. Keep this in mind and fight. Keep this in mind as a lofty goal, as an elevating thought, and work your way with the practices that will be prescribed next to reach this. Understand, you are pure bliss. You are not grief. You are pure existence. You are not this immortal body which is subject to injury and change and distraction, etc. You are none of this. So stand up and do the practices. Have this as your goal and reach. So this is also a great way to inspire Arjuna. Go and fight. And what is the relationship between the self and the body is described in a simile in verse 22. Just as a man casts off worn out clothes and puts on new ones, so also the embodied self casts off worn out bodies and enters others which are new. What happens when the person dies? He goes into another body, a new body. So for the sage, in the same way that we don't grieve when we change our clothes, the sage does not grieve as the soul moves from one body to the next. And again, this is not meant to invalidate grief. As long as we are under the dualistic concept, we have our attraction and repulsions, and we do not live in this reality of the self, there will be grief, and it's valid. But we should hold this as our ideal and strive hard. And on the way, we should do our dharma. We should do what is righteous, what is meant for us to do. And now will come a little bit more explanation and then the practices. Okay, so having this knowledge, what do I do? And we will talk about that in our next videos. Om Shanti.